1. Secretly going to see my husband, who works in a different place. I witnessed him cheating with my own eyes. He shielded the girl behind him, and looked at me with a hint of defensiveness. Don't make things difficult for her. It's my fault. I'll take responsibility for what I've done. Looking at him, I suddenly laughed. It seemed that I wasn't really very sad. How could he be wrong? He just wants to pursue his vivid love. And what I can get is all the property of the two of us. Hilarious. Except for him. Is there still someone who believes in love? When I saw Anson lying on the same bed with a strange girl with my own eyes, I was still so shocked that I couldn't say a word. Although from the moment I entered the door, I had guessed it. There was a pair of high heels that didn't belong to me at the door, and a bag that didn't belong to me was hanging on the shelf in the entrance. Probably hearing the sound of me opening the door, the girl's coquettish laughter in the room stopped abruptly. I walked to the bedroom. The door was not closed. Anson was smoking. The cigarette ash was flicked into the ashtray on the bedside table. The girl shrank under the quilt, her head resting on his chest, not daring to look at me. Why are you here? You didn't say to give a heads up in advance. Anson's voice was a bit hoarse. He extinguished the cigarette, but before slowly meeting my gaze, there was no emotion in his eyes. No panic. No guilt. Calm like a stagnant pool. It was as if a big hand was tightly clutching my heart. I looked at him in disbelief, even though I had been mentally prepared. After hearing Anson's words, I still staggered back a step. It turns out that seeing one's own husband also requires giving a heads up in advance. I hid my trembling hand behind me. Looking into Anson's eyes, I squeezed out a sentence from my throat with great effort. Do you know what you are doing? As soon as the words were out, I realized how ridiculous I was. How could he not know? I shifted my gaze to the girl, probably encouraged by Anson's attitude. She boldly met my gaze. At just one glance, I seemed to understand. What's your name? I asked her. As soon as I finished speaking, Anson stretched out his long arm and shielded the girl behind him. Finally, there was emotion on his face. A hint of defensiveness. Ella, don't make things difficult for her. It's my fault. I'll take responsibility for what I've done. 2. Anson got off the bed and found a brand new dress from the closet. He handed the dress to the girl. His tone was full of doting and soothing. Be good. Put it on. Go home first. I'll find you later. The girl nodded timidly. She turned her back and put on the dress. Anson personally pulled up the zipper for her. Looking at him, I suddenly laughed. I laughed so hard that the tears that were about to well up were held back. I didn't look at the two of them anymore and walked to the balcony of the living room. The window was opened, and a wave of hot wind blew in. A mood of driving many kilometers to see him without telling him was blown away, along with the surprise I wanted to give him. Anson personally sent the girl out of the door and watched her enter the elevator. The door opened and closed. Closed and opened. Anson stood in the living room, only 2 or 3 meters away from me. It was like there was a deep chasm between us. He cleared his throat before speaking. Ella, let's talk. Anson lit a cigarette. He leaned back on the sofa. When mentioning the girl, the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. He looked like a teenager who had just fallen in love. Really tired. Truly. If it weren't for meeting Gina, I might have collapsed long ago. Ella, there is no love between us anymore. Let's just call it quits. It's good for you and me, while there are no children yet. He said it seriously, word by word, as if he had rehearsed countless times in his heart. The 3 words, let's call it quits, casually brushed aside the 10 years we spent together. 4 years in love. 6 years of marriage. The boy who was always careful in the past has grown up and changed. After finishing the cigarette, he stood up from the sofa, took the car keys and went out. Before leaving, he glanced at me. Think carefully about the divorce. I can compensate you as much as possible. 3. After Anson left, I stood in the living room for a long time. I didn't sit on the sofa because I thought it was dirty. There were no longer my things in the house. Probably Anson had put them all away. The doll on the bedside, the night gun in the closet, and the skincare products in the bathroom had nothing to do with me. I turned off the recording on my phone, took a few photos, and returned to the car. There was still a hospital's B ultrasound report on the passenger seat. I carefully put it in a file folder. It was a surprise for Anson. He probably will never know. After coming out of the hospital for the examination in morning, I excitedly called Anson several times. He didn't answer any of them. I didn't think much. I thought he was busy. I asked for leave from the company and drove to the city where Anson works. I wanted to tell Anson this news in person. Thinking about it, maybe everything is traceable. Starting from when he didn't come home very often. In the year when Anson and I were preparing to get married, his job was suddenly transferred to another place. He held me in his arms and patiently comforted me. Ella, will you believe me? I don't believe it. I have never believed in long-distance relationships. Later, it was he who said that he would give me all his salary, come back once a week, and report to me anytime and anywhere. For the sake of his career and future. I relented. Anson said he was very tired. But I am also tired. When decorating the wedding room, the endless quarrels with the decoration team. Anson doesn't know. When both parents were sick and hospitalized. Shuttling back and forth nonstop between the hospital and home. Anson doesn't know. In the 2 years of preparing for pregnancy. After every failure. Facing the urging of parents to have a baby alone. Anson also doesn't know. Love made me overcome all difficulties and endure all grievances alone. Anson said that without another person, he would have collapsed long ago. I smiled self-mockingly. Tears were swirling in my eyes. But in the end they didn't fall. I don't seem to be really very sad, so I don't even want to have a hysterical quarrel with Anson. For I didn't go home overnight. Instead, I found a hotel. After taking a bath and lying on the bed, my thoughts were somewhat groggy. It was already late at night when Anson called. He probably went back and found that I wasn't there. Did you go home? He suppressed his voice and there was not a hint of concern in his tone. Without waiting for my response, he continued, I'll go home this week. Let's talk about divorce. Just state your requirements directly. Don't tell our parents for now. After hanging up the phone, my thoughts gradually came back. Probably because I finally found out, and he didn't want to pretend anymore. I twitched the corner of my mouth and forced a smile. So after returning to my own city the next day, I didn't even go home and went straight to the hospital. The tears that hadn't fallen before fell when making an appointment for an abortion. The operation is scheduled for next week. The child I had been looking forward to for a long time came at the wrong time. Just as I came out of the hospital, Anson's mother called me. Ella, are you at home? Your dad has cooked pork rib, soup and stewed pig's trotters. I'll bring them to you now. I hid in the car and suddenly tears gushed out. My throat seemed blocked by cotton. And I couldn't say a word. Anson's mother was still chattering. It wasn't until I had composed myself that I responded with a yes. When I got home, Anson's parents were already busy in the kitchen. After greeting them, I hid in the bedroom. How difficult can a long-distance relationship be? Anson's father is a soldier. Before he retired, Anson's mother brought up Anson alone. How did they get through those times? 5 after having a meal and seeing off Anson's parents, I nestled on the sofa. Suddenly, Anson's words from last night rang in my mind, hitting my heart word by word. Ella, it's not that I've changed. It's that we've both changed. The way you are so meticulous about calculations now really makes me unable to breathe. Really. But Gina is different. She is innocent and lovely. A piece of cake can make her happy for half a day. I almost laughed sarcastically. Anson said I am meticulous about calculations. I don't deny it. But he seems to have forgotten. During the 4 years of college, it was with my living expenses that we two survived. Probably because he was in the military. Anson's father demands Anson with the standards he demands of himself. He doesn't have much living expenses. But being in love is expensive. It was I who has crimped and saved bit by bit to fulfill so many of his wishes. Later, after we got married, it was he who proposed to hand over his salary for all the big and small expenses at home, mortgage payments, car loans, and social interactions. I can only calculate them one by one. I thought our life was getting better and better. But in the end, it still couldn't withstand the harsh kick of reality. Anson said he loved me, but it was just love in the past. Later, it seems that something was mixed in, which changed the nature of our love. I looked at him with a smile and didn't refute any of his accusations against me. Since there is no love anymore, what's the point of saying these? I only asked him one question. When did it start with Gina? He pursed his lips and didn't speak. I didn't mean to salvage our relationship. He probably misunderstood. That's why he deliberately called me in the middle of the night to remind me that we had reached the point of divorce. I'm not that sad. But there is still a tinge of soreness in my heart. The wedding photo taken 6 years ago is placed in the most prominent position in the living room, stinging my eyes. I walked over and took the wedding photo out of the frame. A piece of paper fell out and landed on the ground. I bent down to pick it up. But when I saw the content on the paper, my fingertips paused. When I stood up, I smiled in a somewhat dazed way. 6, probably even Anson himself has forgotten. 6 years ago, in order to marry me, he put every promise on paper word by word. His so sincere and passionate love made me really think that he would be good to me for a lifetime. In the first 2 years of being in a long-distance relationship, he always secretly ran home, 2 or 3 times a week, chasing the stars at night and the rising sun. I was extremely distressed. He touched the top of my head and said that there was a little crybaby waiting for him at home and he couldn't rest assured. Later, he got a promotion and his work became busier and busier and busier. I also gradually accepted this long-distance life. But every Friday, he still insisted on going home. His salary card has always been in my hand. If I don't touch it, he will actively transfer the money into my card. Credit card bills are also sent to my mailbox. I have never doubted his sincerity. But trust, like love, it's likes and poured into a sealed glass bottle. Once it's broken, it scatters. I put that piece of paper away and was silent for a long time. It wasn't until the doorbell rang that I came to my senses. All the things about Anson at home were packed into cardboard boxes by me. I called Lala Move and asked the driver to deliver them to his current residence. When Lala Move delivered it, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. Anson called me, his tone a bit unfriendly. Ella, what on earth are you doing? What do you mean by packing up all my things and sending them over? His voice suddenly became somewhat harsh. I was stunned for a moment and hung up his call. What could I mean? He is the one who cheated. He is the one who wants a divorce. Naturally, he is the one who should get out. 7 Anson came back at noon on Saturday. He stood at the door and kept pressing the doorbell. Through the camera, I saw him looking impatient and Gina constantly comforting him. I didn't expect him to bring Gina and blatantly come to talk to me about divorce. Probably because he couldn't enter the house. He finally called me. Ella, did you change the lock? We haven't divorced yet. Don't be too excessive. The tenderness in the past seemed to be all pretended. When there is no love anymore, every word spoken is full of barbs. Lying on the bed in the beauty salon, I held the phone a little farther away. Well, you also know we haven't divorced yet? Then what do you mean by bringing your mistress here? I seldom speak sarcastically. This is probably the first time I've talked to Anson like this. My best friend lying next to me gave me a thumbs up. Anson on the other end of the phone was obviously choked for a moment. The phone on speakerphone was finally turned off by him. And his gaze finally fell on the camera. The day after I sent Anson's things away, I changed the lock and installed a video doorbell by the way. Hearing my counter question, Gina's face turned pale. She pulled Anson's sleeve, and her eyes suddenly reddened. The phone was brought to Anson's ear. His tone was even worse. Ella, there's no need to speak so harshly. Gina is not a mistress. I sneered and didn't dwell on this with Anson anymore. I made an appointment with him at the coffee shop closest to me. My best friend said she wanted to accompany me, but I refused. It's okay. Just getting a divorce and getting rid of a bad man. I gain from it. Anson parked the car by the side of the road. Gina didn't get out. She sat in the passenger seat, leaning against the car window and looking into the coffee shop. Coincidentally, our gazes met. She dodged for a moment, and the car window was rolled up. When Anson came in, I had already withdrawn my gaze. He sat opposite me and pushed the divorce agreement in front of me. Anson has always been like this. As long as he makes a decision, he will have very strong execution. Take a look. If there are any unsatisfactory parts, you can bring them up and I'll ask the lawyer to revise it. I took a quick glance. The reason for divorce is a breakdown in relationship. The property division is 50-50 between us. I pushed the agreement back and stared at his face. He seems to be more and more different from the Anson in my memory. On him, I can't find any trace of our past love. I took a sip of the coffee in front of me and thought for a long time before asking him. Do you remember what you promised me before we got married? Anson almost immediately opened his mouth. Ella, I really don't love you anymore. Let's part amicably. Okay? Even for the sake of our 10 years in the past. Don't cling on. When he spoke, he frowned tightly and tapped on the table with his fingers. Cling on. I shook my head with a smile. Anson, I'm not clinging on to you. I just want to ask you, do the words you said before still hold true? If they don't hold true anymore, then the letter of commitment you wrote by hand should still hold true, right? Probably because we were in a long-distance relationship for a long time and I got used to being alone. I found that my heart has become very strong. So strong that even if the person I loved for 10 years suddenly changed, I could accept it quickly. With or without him. It seems there's no difference. He was stunned for a moment. What do you mean? I made a copy of the paper that fell from the frame of our wedding photo that day and pushed the copy in front of him. I won't show you the original. According to what you wrote, the car, house, and savings are all mine. Anson was driven away by me in anger. Looking at his face gradually turning red. The depression in my heart seemed to dissipate a lot all of a sudden, especially after he saw what he had written by himself. He probably finally remembered. So his expression was so colorful. Ella, you know what? I'm really fed up with your current calculating appearance. He pressed his lips tightly and squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. I should be sad, right? I didn't know that he had already been so tired of me. But I'm really not very sad. Anson, it's not that I'm calculating. People should always be responsible for everything they do and every word they say. The so-called being overly concerned about trifles is just me asking him to fulfill his promise. He said that if he did anything wrong to me after marriage, he would voluntarily leave the house with nothing. Obviously it was something he promised himself. How could it be that I am overly concerned about trifles? Anson pinched the space between his eyebrows. After a long time, he said, Ella, this is why I don't love you. Gina wouldn't be like this. She knows when to advance and retreat better than you. After Anson left, I stared at his back and laughed until tears came out. Know when to advance and retreat. I am not ignorant of when to advance and retreat. I just understand it too well. That's why when I found that marriage and love were both rotten, I chose to take a step back in time to cut losses. Perhaps Anson now has never thought that the blank shot he fired when he wrote the letter of commitment 6 years ago would hit him right between the eyebrows 6 years later. That's why he is so furious. I have no objection to him pursuing his vivid love. I want him to fulfill his bragging words from before. And he shouldn't object either. 10 after coming out of the coffee shop, I went to find the lawyer recommended by my best friend. I didn't get much evidence of Anson's infidelity. but I don't want to waste any more time with him. That day, after pushing open the door and seeing the high heels, I turned on my phone's recording. Later, after Anson sent Gina away and talked to me about divorce, he said a lot about him and Gina. From how they met, to how he was attracted by Gina, and then to the fact that he finally didn't have to lie to me anymore, that he loved me. Give it a try. There's no big problem. The other party has clearly admitted his infidelity behavior and put forward a compensation proposal. This letter of commitment written before marriage is equivalent to a loyalty agreement. Did the other party press his fingerprint in person? The lawyer is about the same age as me. When listening to the recording, he frowned tightly. It wasn't until he saw the letter of commitment written by Anson that his brows slightly relaxed. I nodded. Yes. He pressed his fingerprint in person on our wedding day. Memory seemed to be torn open a gap, and those things from the past kept pouring out. 6 years ago, Anson and I had just graduated, with passionate love. We couldn't wait to get married immediately. So our parents sat down together to discuss the wedding. In our hometown, betrothal gifts are generally high. Anson's parents looked at each other and didn't speak for a long time with blushing faces. I took the initiative to stand up and ease the embarrassment of the two families. Mom and Dad. Anyway, the betrothal gift will be brought back as it is. Just a symbolic amount is fine. Numbers like 66, 0 or 88. 0 are very good and auspicious. We can earn money to buy houses and cars by ourselves. Don't worry. Life is lived. We will definitely live well. That day, I was as determined as Anson. Determined that our future would be good and that none of us would change. I didn't ask for the betrothal gift. Secretly, I returned it intact to Anson's parents. Anson was so moved that his eyes turned red. So on our wedding day, in front of all our relatives and friends, he solemnly wrote a letter of commitment. He said that he might not be able to give me a prosperous life immediately, but he would work hard. His future would always have me. Everything he owned would also be mine. So everything he owns, except for love, should be mine. 11 When I got home, Anson's parents were waiting at the door. I rarely come over on weekend evenings. My heart skipped a beat inexplicably, and I quickly walked up. Mom and Dad, why are you here? Why didn't you call me? How long have you been waiting? I took the big and small bags from their hands and hurriedly opened the door. I changed the door lock and even the password. Ella, is there something you are hiding from Mom and Dad? They looked at each other, pondered for a long time before asking me. I was stunned. Although Anson and I have come to the point of divorce, we still reached a consensus. Before the divorce is over, neither of us should alarm our parents. No. I pretended to be nonchalant and answered firmly. Anson's parents are very kind to me. I can't cook, so they come over every few days to cook my favorite dishes. They will specially line up to buy my favorite cakes and desserts. There will never be a shortage of fruits and yogurts in the refrigerator. In the past, when they came over, I could always chat with them about family matters and make them happy. But today, sitting face to face with them on the sofa, for the first time, I had the urge to run away. Getting married is never just a matter for two people. Divorce is also like this. Did Anson quarrel with you? You didn't even tell us such a big thing as being pregnant. If Anson made you angry, tell Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad will scold him, Anson's mother said while observing my expression. Hearing Anson's mother's words, my heart suddenly missed a beat and I didn't even have time to react. I was panicked and wanted to deny it. I didn't. We met Winnie when we went out this morning. She told us. Aren't you always having checkups with her? 12 from knowing I was pregnant to deciding to have an abortion. It was only one day. I specially made an appointment at another hospital for the abortion surgery. After making the appointment, I was a bit dizzy because of the divorce. So I forgot that the fact of being pregnant couldn't be hidden at all. Winnie is the doctor who did my ultrasound and also a longtime friend of Anson's mother. There's no reason. I just don't want it. At 10 o'clock in the evening, I sat cross-legged on the sofa and was stared at with livid faces by my parents. They came all the way from out of town. As soon as they learned that I was pregnant, they bought train tickets. Actually, it should have been a very happy and celebratory thing. But after learning that I planned to have an abortion, the atmosphere in the living room became extremely oppressive. Anson's parents sat aside and wanted to comfort my parents. They opened their mouths but fell silent again. They probably guessed that there was a problem in the relationship between Anson and me. Ella, did Anson make you angry? I'll call him right now. Anson's mother dialed the phone very quickly. I didn't stop her. The phone rang many times before it was answered. Hello? A sweet female voice sounded on the other end of the phone. Anson's mother's hand trembled, and the phone slipped from her palm and fell on the carpet with a thud. Anson and I have the same habit. For close people, most phone numbers are memorized and not stored in the address book. I glanced at the still connected phone screen and pulled a smile at the corner of my mouth. Very good. I don't need to explain anymore. Anson's father stood up abruptly from the sofa and went straight out the door. Anson's mother picked up the phone from the ground, glanced at me, and ran out after him. In the end, only my parents and I were left. Their faces became even uglier. I shrugged and suddenly felt relieved. I made an appointment for the surgery next week. On Wednesday, 13 Anson's parents rushed to the city where Anson works overnight. Probably they gave Anson a scolding. So at 4 in the morning, Anson called me. As soon as he opened his mouth, he was filled with fury. Ella, I just realized how disgusting you are. We haven't been able to conceive for so long. Now that we are about to divorce, you say you are pregnant? Why is it so coincidental that you tell me? To get more property. You really stop at nothing. I tell you, I am definitely getting a divorce. I leaned on the sofa, turned off the speakerphone, and hung up the phone. Yes, we haven't been able to conceive for so long, but it happens at this time. I placed my hand on my lower abdomen. My heart ached like being pricked by needles. With the dense pain, I am not sad because of Anson's betrayal. Anyway, love is mostly like this. Looking back, my parents stood in the corridor of the bedroom, looking at me with eyes full of pity. I can't sleep. Neither can they. It's okay. Sweetie, Mom and Dad will accompany you to the hospital next week. After you recover, Mom and Dad will take you on a trip. Haven't you always wanted to travel abroad? I nodded, and suddenly my eyes became very sour. In the end, only my parents support me. It seems that everyone can change, but they will never change. Anson's mother called in immediately after. She probably had been crying. With a hoarse voice, she kept apologizing to me. Sorry, Ella. It's Mom who didn't teach him well. Don't be impulsive. Okay. Mom and Dad will take him back tomorrow and let him apologize to you. Forgive him just this once. Okay. On the other end of the phone, I could even hear Anson's father educating Anson. But there is no middle ground for betrayal. Moreover, Anson doesn't need my forgiveness at all. What he wants is love. 14 Anson was still forcibly dragged back by his parents. The living room that was always empty suddenly became crowded. When I came out of the bedroom, I just saw Anson being kicked in by Anson's father. At just one glance, nausea started churning in my stomach. I ran into the bathroom and are etched for a long time. When I came out again, I happened to meet Anson's gaze. His eyes were full of disgust for me. He stood at the entrance, deadlocked with his parents. What are you thinking? Don't you know you have a wife? How could you be seduced by a little vixen outside? Anson, do you have to lose all the face of the Anson family? Anson's mother slapped Anson again and again, probably because Gina was mentioned. There was finally a trace of emotion in Anson's eyes. He pursed his lips. Gina is not a vixen. Mom, speak nicely. I sat on the sofa and watched this farce in front of me calmly. I never thought that such a cliché plot would happen between Anson and me. Love comes and goes. And in the end, it is as disgusting as eating a fly. Mom and Dad, you go back. You always know that I can't tolerate any sand in my eyes. I will talk to Anson about the divorce through a lawyer. I stopped Anson's parents. After a noisy morning, I am very tired. And they should be very tired too. After saying that, I stood up from the sofa and walked straight into the kitchen. After a night, my parents seemed to have calmed down a lot. They pretended nothing had happened, and were busy in the kitchen for a long time. When I came in, my dad lifted the lid of the casserole. Look, I cooked your favorite seafood congee. 15 Marital infidelity is originally nothing glorious. I haven't made it known to everyone. This is already my greatest respect for our 10-year relationship. Anson doesn't think so. He seems unwilling to admit the promise he wrote with his own hand. The talk with my entrusted lawyer was very unpleasant. Let's go to litigation then. I can't take a step back. I must make him fulfill his promise. Shortly after I had just finished an abortion surgery, the lawyer's call came. I stated my attitude, and the lawyer also agreed with my idea. After hanging up the phone, my mother patted my hand. All right. Don't be angry. You also need to rest well during the small postpartum period. Have you asked for leave from the company? Right? I nodded. As I looked up, I saw Gina standing at the door of the ward. I don't know how she found me, but her eyes are full of pride and provocation. I frowned. I really didn't understand. Why do mistresses always have to find a sense of existence in front of the original partner? That day after Anson was brought back by his parents, it was also she who took the initiative to add me. She said that Anson told her himself that only when he was with her did he experience what true love is. She said that Anson had been tired of me for a long time. Actually, such drama is completely unnecessary. Even if she didn't do this, I would still leave. Following my line of sight, my parents looked over, their eyes full of confusion. Who is it? Do you know her? After thinking for a while, I shook my head. Not really. She's Anson's mistress. My voice was neither loud nor soft. There were other people in the ward. Hearing the word mistress, everyone's eyes looking at Gina at the door were filled with disgust. The family member of the patient closest to the door rushed to the door of the ward in one step and slammed the door shut. Before closing the door, she also spat out, "Bad luck." See, that's what happens when you are a mistress. Everyone shouts and beats you. 16 Divorce litigation needs to wait in line. Until I was discharged from the hospital, I still hadn't got my turn. As soon as I got home, my best friend came to see me in a hurry and brought me good news. She asked someone to say hello. My lawsuit with Anson is estimated to be able to start soon. I asked the lawyer. We can definitely win. But are you sure you have calculated clearly your joint property? I nodded. The houses and cars we bought after marriage are all recorded. Anson's salary is also transferred to my bank card regularly. He will also take the initiative to send me his pay slip. Even after he got involved with Gina, he didn't slack off at all. Now thinking about it, if it weren't for his flawless performance, how could I not notice it at all? I made a joke deliberately and casually. Love or not, actually giving money is enough. Then you have to get back all the things he bought for the mistress. My best friend glared at me and reminded me. The things he gave are not worth much. I know. What should be taken back, must be taken back. Thanks to Gina adding me and liking to show off her love on moments. All the things Anson gave her were posted by her. I conveniently took screenshots and sent them to the lawyer. A lawyer replied with a good, and told me to rest assured. During the waiting period for the court session, Anson's parents came to see me several times. Actually, they know the password, but every time they still ring the doorbell actively. They will only come in after waiting for me to open the door. I thought they came to persuade me to take a step back, part amicably with Anson, and not go to the litigation stage. But it seems that they really just came to see me simply. Every time they came, they brought the soup they cooked and left after telling me to take good care of myself. My parents were initially cold-eyed, but later they could only find an excuse to hide. The two families used to become one family because of me and Anson. Now because of me and Anson, the one family has become two families again. 17 on the day of the court session. Anson argued vigorously. He didn't deny the fact of his infidelity. Standing in the dock, he still couldn't help looking affectionately at Gina, who was in the audience. Like a pure love warrior, holding high the banner of love. Anson's parents gazed at Ance and gradually became disappointed. Having been a soldier for most of his life, Anson's father probably never expected his own son to do such a thing. That letter of commitment was indeed written by me on our wedding day. But it can't be evidence. It doesn't have legal effect. I don't admit it. If you don't admit it, why did you write it? Looking at the strange Anson, I laughed out loud. Until I took out the video of that day's wedding. After he finished writing the letter of commitment, he read it word by word to me. His voice spread throughout the banquet hall through the microphone. He said that he was willing to accept the supervision of everyone. He would only love me in his life. He said that if he were to cheat in the future, all the properties such as savings, cars, houses would be mine. He wouldn't take a penny. He said it himself. No one forced him. He wrote it himself. No one forced him. In the end of the argument, the law still stood by my side. The mortgage and car loan were paid off 2 years ago. We basically have no debts. 6 years after marriage. Most of the savings are in my bank card. Anson was not convinced and wanted to appeal, but was stopped by his parents. That's enough. Don't be embarrassing. Anson's father's face was very ugly and he slapped Anson on the face. Anson's mother shook her head. She came up to me, took my hand, and stuffed a bank card into my hand. The password is your birthday. It's our parents' intention for you. Anson doesn't cherish you. He's just not blessed. Anson saw and sneered. He spoke sarcastically. Ella, don't you think you reek of the stink of money all over? Except for houses, cars, and savings. There's nothing in your eyes. It really disgusts me. It's really hilarious. I've got houses, cars, and savings. What else do I need that ethereal love for? I've had it before. It's even nastier than shit. Anson took Gina's hand and walked towards the parking lot without looking back. After thinking for a while, I chased after them. Anson, remember to wash the car and send it to me. The car is mine. According to the judgment, he has to send it to me within a month. Anson paused in his steps and glared at me viciously. Gina quietly pulled her hand out of his. Following behind Anson, her steps became more and more hesitant. I exchanged a funny look with my best friend. Probably only Anson still believes in love in this materialistic society. Especially his love with Gina. All the things he bought for Gina were demanded to be returned on the spot. Anson said he would find a way to compensate me. So I didn't pursue it further. I found Gina's chat records with me and showed them to my best friend. Gina said that a marriage without love is like loose sand and will fall apart sooner or later. My best friend laughed so hard that she almost fell over. After all, a relationship without an economic foundation is more like loose sand. It's just that this loose and scattered even faster than we imagined. According to the judgment requirements, Anson ragged it until the last day to come and handle the transfer procedures for the house and car with me. Anson's parents still love Anson after all and left their small house to him. The old couple silently returned to their hometown in the countryside. When they left, I went to see them off. I returned the bank card that was stuffed into my hand to them and called them Mom and Dad one last time. Standing at the entrance of the Government Affairs Hall, he hesitated for a long time before speaking. If I say I regret it, will you forgive me? I'm serious. Ella. I seem to regret it. My best friend was almost dumbfounded. I opened my mouth, urged him with the number-taking slip, and didn't even give him a direct look. Anson, don't you think you're being very long-winded now? It really disgusts me. 19 after the procedures were completed, I could finally part ways with Anson. Before leaving, he suddenly grabbed my arm. Ella, you're even more heartless than I imagined. Why can you let go of 10 years of feelings so easily? You didn't even leave me any room for redemption. He seemed to not understand my resolutions. Yes. From the time I found out about his infidelity to our complete end, it was only 3 months. I didn't make a scene or quarrel. I was as calm as an outsider. I shook off his arm and deliberately taunted him. Because I know that no matter how sad I am, we can't go back. And, didn't you find your vivid love? Where's your love? It's only been a few months. Why? When you talk about love with Gina, isn't Gina talking about love with you? My best friend couldn't hold back and chuckled. A girl in her early 20s can't really be after your feelings. Do you really think you're a pure love warrior? When I was in a divorce lawsuit with Anson, I applied for property preservation. After the judgment was handed down, Gina probably found out that she really couldn't get anything. It is said that after having a few quarrels with Anson, she clamored to break up. Probably because our laughter was too loud. He took a step back. He was much more haggard than a month ago. The more I looked at him, the more relieved I felt. After thinking for a long time, I still gave him a sentence before leaving. Anson, come on. Remember to always believe in love.